By this point in time, everyone has at least heard about the Witcher IP, and it's needless to say that the majority of people who know of it are in love with that universe and what it has to offer. And no, it's not thanks to this.
Fuck.
It's because the company known as Projekt RED decided to step up with the intention of taking Andrei Sapkowski's rich novels, which I haven't read because I'm too lazy, and turning them into a mature RPG, which for the time was one of the first mainstream games to do it. But enough with introductions. Let's dig deeper into why The Witcher 3 is one of the greatest RPGs ever made. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the video. First, who is CD Projekt RED? Well, to answer that, we need to go back to the early 90s when the Polish initiative took off. Marcin Iwiński and Michal Kisinski were the two high school friends who made it happen. How did they start though? Surprisingly enough, but as often occurs, not as video game developers, but as video game distributors. They were constantly looking for the best and most popular games available in order to import them in Poland and sell them in the open market. Michal handled sales, while Marcin took care of communicating with suppliers and arranging international shipments. Marcin Iwiński says, and I quote, "I first met Michal in high school. I walked into the class and there was an empty seat next to him, so I took it. By the time school was out, we had both become truants, skipping classes to play games." They first entered the business world in 1994 with the establishment of CDP, which was the first member of the CD Projekt Group. The company, formerly known as CD Projekt, focused on importing CD-ROM software releases from the United States. 2 years after its creation, and CDP became the first Polish distributor to publish games in Polish boxes and in Polish manuals. What seems obvious today was a novelty at the time, and the enthusiastic reactions of the gamers proved that the company had hit a marketing bullseye. The next milestone for the company was its first full video game localization. The game was Baldur's Gate. We began analyzing the concept in minute detail. Deep down we felt that players would welcome such a game, that they would buy it if only it were offered in Polish. The game ended up selling over 100,000 copies, a new record. CD Projekt had proven that people were ready to purchase legal games given sufficient product quality, and that is a great point in the piracy debate, meaning that if you provide a high quality service or product, guess what? People will pay you for it. We had to rent out an external warehouse. People lined up to buy the game and wholesalers got in fights over the product. On the first day alone, we sold 18,000 copies, cash payments all around. That was a sweet day. This success paved the way for further distribution agreements covering such global hits as Diablo 2 and Baldur's Gate 2. In short order, CDP became the official Polish distributor of Atari, Cryo, Microsoft, Konami, Sega, and others. We had always wanted to make our own game. Instinctively, we felt we belonged in that world. In 2002, a new chapter in the company's history was opened in the form of another CD Projekt Group member, CD Projekt RED Studio. After porting our first console game to the PC, we were hooked and knew we had to carry on. That's when someone floated the idea to do something with The Witcher. It was a grand return to Andrei Sapkowski's literature, which we had voraciously consumed in our high school and college years. When it turned out that the franchise exploitation and game development rights were for sale, we felt like we had won the lottery. In September 2003, CD Projekt RED commenced work on its first proprietary RPG set in Andrei Sapkowski's universe. The game had a budget of nearly 20 million Polish zlotys, which today would come around $10 million after inflation. This means that at the time it was the most expensive Polish video game ever created. Development involved almost 100 people and took around 4 years to complete until its release date in 2007. The premiere of The Witcher took place on October 26 and it was a commercial success. In Poland alone, 35,000 people bought the game within 3 days of its release. Since then, the game has garnered over 100 international awards. In late 2007, the company began work on a follow-up to The Witcher, and this is a really important moment because it marks the birth of the RED engine, which was a proprietary gaming engine especially created for this project. A project which got released for PC on May 17, 2011. In April 2012, CD Projekt RED proceeded with the Xbox 360 release, and in October, they proudly announced that the game has sold over 2 million damn copies, which is a near twofold improvement over the first Witcher around the same time span, basically. Finally, The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, was released on May 19, 2015 in 15 separate languages and for 3 different hardware platforms: PC, Xbox One and PlayStation 4. In the first 6 weeks following release, The Witcher 3 surpassed more than 6 million units worldwide. By the end of 2015, the game had received over 300 awards, including 5 prestigious Golden Joystick Awards and 2 trophies at the Game Awards. In addition, CD Projekt RED was named Developer of the Year. From what I've covered until now, we can take away that these games were made by self-made professionals who were also passionate gamers themselves and had their main priority in place, which has always been the players. And frankly, it's not surprising to me that these games have had constant increases in sales, release after release. That's basically the gaming community saying, we want more of this shit. Naturally, the third installment of the trilogy was unanimously perceived as the pinnacle of Geralt's journey. And this meant that players and developers alike were hoping to avoid a disappointing landing. How does this game run? Well, for context, I played it on Legion 5 with the following specs. Needless to say that the game ran great for 90% of the time. We're looking at 50 to 60 FPS at a minimum. Sure, there were those few times where I had some frame drops, however we're talking about a few seconds and frankly, it didn't ruin my experience even remotely. Also, these issues had the tendency to manifest themselves mainly in certain expanded areas, like the DLCs for example, where the optimization was maybe a bit overlooked. However, it's expected from a game of this size. That also leads to a few bugs here and there, but nothing too prominent. Overall, no game-breaking issues detected from my part. I will start by stating the obvious, which is that this game looks fucking gorgeous, guys, and not just for its time. Like, this could very well be a 2024 release, honestly. And it would probably sell like 2020 toilet paper. If you compare it to the second game, it's not even fair, so honestly, I won't even bother. The art style looks amazing, like a photography packed with visual punch, saturated colors which are a joy for your eyes, and big, vast open spaces to explore in every direction you point your horse to. The lighting is dynamic, which means that it changes based on the weather and the time of day. And let me tell you that it makes a very noticeable difference. Even now with a detached objective mind, I can easily remember certain landscape views which were breathtaking to look at, and almost feverish actually, in the sense that they felt kind of like dreams which you don't want to wake up from like ever. And frankly, I often caught myself deviating from the checkpoint I was running towards, just to wander off killing whatever monster or bandit crossed my path. And that is why it took me so much time to finish the story. Well, part of the reason actually, but to me, This is already the symptom of a quality game. The foliage is outstanding, like not just in terms of amount but in variety too, and especially in how natural it looks. The design team really did a fantastic job with the environment, including the wildlife, which is also really well integrated, I think. And this is not something to be overlooked in a game that aims towards a certain level of immersion, especially when you consider how massive this open world is. It's actually impressive, honestly, how the hardware doesn't get deep fried in the process of loading everything. A significant drawback has to do with the human models, more specifically with their animations. If you've played the game long enough like I did, after 10 or 20 hours you start to realize pretty fast actually that the game has pretty much the same body language across all characters. And this wouldn't even be that of a problem to me if the movements were not so damn stiff. They almost look like NPCs, which they are. However, what I mean is that in certain dramatic moments, their animations took me out of the scene.
The family! The clan!
Svanrika, I did it for you! Only for you!
And the rigid face micro-expressions do not help this problem at all. But who cares when you have this open world with so many different locations where each one is defined by its own unique atmosphere and character. You start in Kaer Morhen, which you are going to explore more towards the end of the story, and it's a beautiful location, which means a lot to the all-time Witcher fans, and for good reasons I would say. Its importance to the Witcher lore, Geralt, and the way it's presented in this third chapter makes it one of the most memorable locations in the game. Right after you transition to White Orchard, essentially your first playground where you can just start to test your fighting skills and slowly understand how everything works and comes together. I would say that the space is pretty vast and open, but not very dense in terms of enemies or threats. This actually brings up another point, which is that the game has a pretty well balanced learning curve. So maybe the Dark Souls masochists won't be too happy about it. The fun truly begins not too long after leaving White Orchard. We are now in Velen, my friends, arguably the most depressing location in this game, and I fucking love it. This place makes me feel like I'm living through a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. It's so unsettling at times, and it does that in the coziest way possible. Here you can really start to grasp the effectiveness of the open world. You start exploring, finding secret caves, guarded treasures, which is so much fun. There are monsters left and right from different species, and let me tell you, there are a lot in this game. In fact, I had to constantly update my knowledge through the bestiary, which is this section in the menu that catalogs every single creature you encounter through your journey and explains you what they're capable of, what they're vulnerable towards, and some related lore to it. If you want to die less times during your playthrough, I would suggest to keep this in mind because it will help you a lot. Now, of course, that also depends quite a bit on the difficulty you choose to play in. There are 4 ones, and I personally went with Blood and Broken Bones, which was quite challenging. However, if you're quite a good player, I would even suggest you to go for the Death March one. Going back to Velen, I would say that the soul of this map is embedded in the misty swamps, forests and open fields full of corpses. Desolation, poverty, absolute misery. You feel every damn thing with each second that you spend in those parts of the continent, and in my opinion it fits so well with the Rotten Battlefield narrative. North of Velen we keep going with Oxenfurt and Novigrad, which are some of the most lively looking cities you'll ever experience in any video game. You can breathe the Middle Age sprouting from every corner and from every architectural detail. Sometimes I would walk around for hours like a bloody idiot just to admire the buildings, even the shittiest looking crib. Seriously, the designers went insane with the details here. And there's so much to do. You can either have a grooming session, buy and sell merch, and so many other stuff I will let you experience for yourself.
You never heard of them. They're up-and-comers. That's what that means.
3 cents a share. That's $3. You cheap fuck.
It's so interesting to me that these two locations full of life and all those fancy castles are positioned near the dismal looking Velen. It's almost a dichotomy, and I say almost because you'll find some messed up things down there as well. Another thing you will notice is how well merged humans are with the existence of monsters after the conjunction. Soon enough you become part of that reality, and eventually you start expecting the next monster around the corner. And this contributes to an already effective amount of immersion. Hey, is this a Witcher game or a Beowulf one?
And with it came sea monsters.
Oh shit, sorry guys, this is just the Skellig Islands. The next location which lives and breathes the Viking culture. That means a bunch of drunk and bearded men dancing around and fighting, the typical surroundings of the old Scandinavian territory, which is beautifully put to screen through snowy mountains, stormy weather, a large angry sea surrounding the islands, and of course, new types of monsters to catalog in the bestiary. There are many other locations which unravel along the way, including the land of Tucson, which I'm going to discuss later in the video. But overall, this game catches your eye immediately through its unique art style, vast and rich environments, and it allows for a deep enough immersion to make you spend hundreds of hours with it just by going around killing, scavenging and grabbing 90 waters that you'll never use. Man, am I excited for this part. I won't beat around the bush here. The soundtrack is just perfect. And no, I'm not being biased or exaggerating, because I started playing this game around December of 2023, and it's been since then that I've been listening to the entire playlist on repeat. If my brain thinks Spotify, it automatically goes to this game. It's just that good. And not just in and of itself, but how well it's used to elevate certain gameplay and story moments. After all, music is a complementary element in any visual media, but especially in video games. It just makes the experience that more enjoyable and immersive, and I truly believe that we wouldn't have the same game without it. The musicians really put their hearts and souls into this, and it shows in every damn piece. The sound design is integrated really well too. Slashing, bashing, slicing, burning, bleeding, you feel everything. It especially shines through with the sinister noises that different monsters make. And after a while, your brain recognizes them from a mile away. Where the sound design lacks, in my opinion, is in certain cutscenes where you are supposed to feel fear, tension, or any other kind of emotion that the developers intended you to feel. But you actually don't, because there's a disarray clearly between the character's actions and the sound design. This point can be tied with another problem that I've previously discussed regarding the stiff animations. Basically, sometimes there's a disconnect between the idea and the execution. Even so, this aspect of the game, in my opinion, deserves a stamp of approval, and the wonderful soundtrack honestly makes up for all the small imperfections in the sound design. As far as the user experience, I would say it's pretty intuitive despite being packed with functionalities, but that's to be expected from any RPG you play. I'm quite a slow learner, so it took me a bit of time to get comfortable with that state of flow. However, once it clicks and you know what is where, it becomes second nature. The UI looks pretty neat. The style ties really well with The Witcher's vibe, and it uses mainly earthy tones like different shades of yellow and brown. The HUD has the essentials, plus some additional things which you can turn on and off or tweak around based on your preference. You start your journey with Geralt and Vesemir, traveling around No Man's Land for quite some time in order to track down and find Yennefer, who has been gone for a while after Geralt regained his memory. During the first hours, the game focuses on the relationship between these two, And as you talk to Vesemir, you start to understand what has happened in the past and what it means to be a Witcher. This is laid out with pretty good writing and as good of a performance by the voice actors. After a while, just when you are starting to get accustomed to the world, you encounter Yen right in the middle of the action, being chased by the Wild Hunt, aka the threat of this game, which I have a few things to say about a bit later. She finds Ciri and he will ensure the protection of all witches from every single discrimination or threat. Why? Because Ciri is, biologically speaking, his daughter. You see, her blood happens to come from a very powerful bloodline, which is basically a vessel to the power of the Elder Blood. But why is Ciri missing in the first place? Well, she is being chased by the Wild Hunt for basically the same reason. They require her power to protect their universe from the White Frost, which is basically a prophecy that implicates a possible apocalypse in the future. Essentially, Geralt's adoptive daughter is a tool for different factions of people. Naturally, Geralt doesn't know all of this at the time. He is tasked by Emir to assist Yen in finding Ciri, since he is pretty good at tracking down missing people, aside from killing monsters and emphasizing how much he hates portals.
I hate portals.
Without spoiling too much, Geralt's path guides him into different lands. The first signs of Ciri are found in Velen, just before she escapes from these beauties. Then you proceed to Oxenfurt and Novigrad, where you meet Triss, who has a specific history with Geralt, let's put it that way. Eventually you find some tracks of Ciri's presence, which lead to the islands of Skellige. One thing leads to another, and so on. Essentially, these are the main points of the plot, roughly speaking, and in between you have a ton of content to keep yourself busy with, some of which I found way more interesting than the main campaign. With most games, I have the tendency to cover all the secondary stuff first before diving into the main course. In this case, I wasn't even thinking that much about the story before crossing 80 hours or so, just because the game is so immersive and engaging in so many different ways. One example that comes to mind is the Baron storyline, which has everything. Character development, intriguing situations, conflict, action, and great dramatic moments. A theme where the game doesn't pull any punches. There are so many more examples like this, and honestly, after a while I forgot that I had a campaign to bring forward. The game ends with an interesting but satisfying note. It has kind of a bittersweetness to it. Nonetheless, it leaves you with a lasting impression of a long and impactful story. Not the best I've experienced personally, but good enough for what it wanted to tell. However, that last sequence, that was cathartic. The characters are pretty good, even the secondary ones. You remember most of them thanks to a solid writing, eye-catching character design, and as good of a performance from the voice actors. Now, I understand this is a fictional universe. However, I can't help but underline the lack of relatability in some cases. This is a subjective point, so take it for what it is. The protagonist is Geralt, also known as the White Wolf, castrated and tortured by the House of the Wolf, just like any other Witcher with a respective house. Now, quick side note, this is not just my first RPG, it's also my first contact point with the Witcher IP, so forgive me if I make mistakes or say stupid shit, which I will definitely do. Anyway, by reading the extracts that the game offers you in the form of books, I learned a lot of information regarding this universe. Sometimes I even read too much, considering that I'm not a bookworm by any stretch of the imagination. It's explained that Geralt, like most Witchers, is partially stripped of his emotions because of his upbringing, and that explains why he's mostly stoic and has the charisma of Moai's statue. That may be part of the reason why I never fully connected to this character. It's almost like he's an unbiased narrator of his own story. However, good dialogues for the most part and a wide range of situations to put him in for sure helped this issue by a long shot. At the end of the day, Geralt remains a memorable and iconic character. Let's talk romantic interests. There are a few cases, including the Hearts of Stone DLC. Sorry to say, I didn't find any of them engaging enough. I haven't read the books or played the previous games, so maybe that has something to do with it, since this third game implies that you are aware of certain past dynamics or relationships, at least at some level. If you pay enough attention to the right conversations and information, eventually you catch on. Unfortunately, I was kind of indifferent towards both Yennefer and Triss. The only one that kept me a bit interested or engaged was her, in the Hearts of Stone DLC. And it kind of makes sense, because here the writers didn't rely as much on past relationships. Instead, they took the time to flesh it out during multiple occasions in this DLC. But I have to let this out of my chest. I really don't like that haircut. The side characters are a mixed bag. One of my favorites in the top of my mind is Dijkstra, very fleshed out. I actually felt quite bad when a certain decision had to be made. One that didn't grow on me was Dandelion. Now, I know he's a favorite for a lot of Witcher fans, he's probably like that in the books also. However, to me he was just so irritating. I don't know, with the way he was written or presented, I just didn't like him. The bad guys, I'm not gonna lie, the first time they made their appearance I thought they were one of the scariest and most threatening looking motherfuckers I had ever encountered in any video game. Until they were not. Why is that, you say? Well, first of all, you barely encounter them, and when you actually do, it's kind of disappointing. At times they almost felt like unexpected side missions. Every time I had an opportunity to go on a mission related to these guys, I prefer to wander off into side activities basically. However, to the game's credit, the story is heavily based on what has happened in the previous titles, and by not having played them, well, I may lack the necessary attachment to these characters and storylines in order for me to really get invested in this particular story. The bottom line is that I didn't find the villains that compelling or memorable enough. I truly believe that the story is as good as the villains in question, and I'm sorry to say, but the Wild Hunt did not do it for me. And we finally come to Ciri, who I really liked as a character, I have to say, for the right reasons. Chill. She pops in every now and then to switch things up, and not just story-wise, yes, because they allow you to play as her on multiple occasions. And the part that I appreciated the most has to do with the fact that these playable segments are actually flashbacks that serve as a substitute to the usual boring exposition that you see in most story-driven games. Show don't tell, guys, and that's not something to be taken for granted, in my opinion. Sure, maybe her combat doesn't have all the layers that Geralt has. However, the devs still took the trouble to implement it, and I'm glad they did. There are so many more characters to cover since the world is massive and the storylines are many. So, I'm going to stop here. The gameplay is where this title really won me over. It's fast-paced, dynamic, intuitive and flexible enough to allow you the freedom to customize according to your playstyle, and it rarely gets boring. Sure, it might have some imperfections like the crossbow, for example, which is basically useless and not at all satisfying to use. However, let's move in with order. The tutorial does a pretty good job in teaching you the basic mechanics of the gameplay, where the main ones you're gonna use are melee combat and science. To really get good with the gameplay, you need to experiment a bit and study how the mechanics work in your favor or against you, depending of course on the situation you're in or the threat you're facing. I think I just explained how every RPG works. The melee combat is awesome. It feels so good every time, and the more you progress, the more it becomes an extension of your arm. You'll have a wide range of weapons to choose from, some of which you'll find through scavenger hunts, others in blacksmiths by using crafting diagrams, which are available in merchant points or hidden around the open world. There are two swords at your disposal, one made out of steel for humans and the silver one for monsters. You can upgrade each one constantly, and they also get consumed or damaged, so you'll need to maintain them using different repair kits that the game offers you. Aside from crafting or buying stronger swords, you can also upgrade them using runestones, which are of different types depending on the kind of damage you want to inflict. You want to poison them, you want to burn their asses, you want to give them the experience of the time of the month. There's something for everybody. Speaking of blood and gore, the devs went insane with that shit, and I'm saying this in the best way possible. Every time you dismember something, or someone for that matter, you feel it in every possible way. I could not be happier about this, just because it fits so well with the brutality of this universe. And look, I can talk all day about sword combat, but the point is, it's great. Oh yeah, also hand-to-hand combat fucking sucks, but it's not a big deal since you will rarely use punches to get out of a fight. To close this section, certain moves are conditioned by the stamina bar and the adrenaline points, both of which are basically upgradable while leveling up the character. And these two elements are also related to the use of signs, the next important gameplay mechanic. They also feel really good and they're so fun to use because of the rhythm they provide to the combat. It's like slash, cut and burn, burn, cut and blow.
What?
You have a set of 5 different signs available to use, which are all accessible through the wheel. Now, some people don't like this UI solution since it tends to interrupt the combat flow quite a bit. To me personally, it wasn't that much of a problem, honestly. Igni allows you to attack with fire streams and it's very effective in close range combat. Ard makes you blow stuff away and it's great for both close and long range combat. Quen, which is basically a shield to protect your ass against tough and dangerous attacks. Irden is used to slow down certain types of monsters and it's mainly used against specters. And finally, Axi. Now, it's there, I rarely used it myself, however, if you like to stun or mind control people, I guess it will help you with that pretty well. Every single sign is upgradable in the skill tree, and you have so many different options in relation to your skill points. So many that it's frankly impossible to max out all of them in one single playthrough. For example, I upgraded most of the Igni and Ard slots just because they are the signs that I mainly used in my playthrough, and once I did that, I felt like a force of nature. This gives the game a lot of replay value in case you want to try different sign combinations in future playthroughs. From early stages, you'll notice that a considerable portion of the gameplay is the investigation aspect of it. I'm talking about the Witcher senses, which you can think of as the detective mode in Arkham Knight, but tailored to the Witcher experience. You see, Witchers are able to see things that normal humans cannot, so the devs turned that into a mechanic which helps you highlight tracks, footprints, and other important details that will guide you through different missions and open world activities.
Looks like rain.
Another asset to your disposal are oils, which you can use to make your swords more effective and efficient towards certain types of monsters based on the type of oil you are using. The first one you get to use, for example, is the Necrophage oil, which deals more damage to ghouls, drowners and all the monsters that are part of the Necrophage type. The game, however, doesn't explain very well that you can actually quick access the oils during combat. And you can do that by long pressing 1 or 2 after opening the wheel. Before figuring that out though, I had to open the inventory every time I wanted to attach a different oil, and it was quite annoying. In this game, alchemy can be really useful if you know which potions to use. And there are so many, maybe too many. I actually ended up using the usual 6 or 8, especially because at some point Geralt became so strong that I didn't need to change my fighting strategy most of the time. But this adds even more replay value, so at the end of the day it remains a very good thing. However, you need to be careful in the amount that you intake, since potions might increase your toxicity meter, which can lead to constant health drain. And if you ask me, the devs did the right thing by including this feature, otherwise potions would be way too OP. Same as every other thing I've described until now, there are bombs for different situations which you can craft and upgrade. And while some are really cool and effective, others are a bit more tedious, like the Dragon Breath one for example, which I rarely used. Previously I've mentioned that the open world is really vast, but how do you move through it? Well, as far as Geralt goes, he can walk, run, swim, dive and jump, which looks quite painful for him. However, if you want to cover large distances, you'll have to rely on your horse, and I will let Roach herself explain what she can do. I gallop and I jump and I do this with my hands and
enough!
I think for the most part riding feels pretty good, and I say mostly, well, because of moments like this. What about all those large bodies of water? Well, you can navigate through them using boats, which are stationed in different parts of the map, and for the amount of time you're going to use them, they're just fine. But in general, I prefer riding or even just fast traveling. Look, it doesn't matter how well done traversal is. Sometimes you just want to go from point A to point B as soon as possible. Yeah, the loading screens are a bit annoying, however, considering the amount of geometry this game has to load, I can give it a pass. Some of the boss fights are pretty good, however they are definitely not the strong aspect of this game, and the fact that I struggle to remember a lot of them is proof of what I'm saying. Imlerith I think was one of the good ones. An even better one was the Caretaker in the Hearts of Stone DLC, and that motherfucker was a menace. I can't even remember how many times I died against him. And I'm sure you'll be able to remind me of other good examples down in the comments. Anyway, that's all I had to say about the gameplay, and despite some small issues, they really did a fantastic job here, really. So much that even after 190 hours of playtime, I still want to get right back into it. If you're wondering about the actual things you can do in this game, well, don't worry one bit, because this open world is packed with a wide range of content. Going into The Witcher 3, the one thing I could not wait to do was killing monsters, and honestly now, can you blame me after this cold ass line?
What are you doing?
Killing monsters.
Come on man, this trailer is pure adrenaline, and to this day I still watch it like it's the first time. And if you're like me, the game will satisfy that itch through monster contracts, which can be found in multiple notice boards scattered across the map, or you can even find yourself in the middle of the mission itself while traversing the open world. And if it's the latter, you can go and receive your reward in coins. However, if you find the contract first, you can negotiate your reward beforehand, which is a good way to maximize your profits. Certain contracts consist in tracking down missing people. Don't let this fool you though, because a lot of them have really interesting things in store. A good example that I remember involves a werewolf curse, which I'm going to leave there because I don't want to ruin it for you. How do you design such a vast, rich open world and not make use of it? Well, the devs thought about this using scavenger hunts, where you will search for hidden treasures, crafting diagrams, weapons, and a lot more. These were really fun because they were not always linear, in the sense that sometimes you encountered the unexpected. In some of these scavenger hunts, but even in other cases, you will encounter some puzzles. Nothing too hard, just something to switch things up once in a while. As you scout the open world, you will encounter some abandoned sites full of monsters, which you will have to kill in order for the former inhabitants to return safely. This will not only give you coin and XP, it will also unlock merchants, blacksmiths and armorers, giving you a larger coverage around the map, which makes it more accessible to craft or trade. In some abandoned sites you'll encounter different monster dens waiting for you to get rid of them. And if you actually manage to do so, you'll make the surroundings safer for the nearby villagers, or simply earn more XP if you happen to be on empty grounds. This is a light way to sidetrack from the main activities that the game offers you, and if you enjoy cards in video games, this is a good example. The open world feels alive, so much that even when you're not playing, it feels like everyday activities are still going on for NPCs.
Who's gonna carry the boats and the logs?
Sometimes the minimap will highlight an exclamation point indicating some kind of situation. It might just be a kid begging for help, who then turns out to be a bait from a group of bandits. A typical thing you'll encounter in the open world are bandit posts holding prisoners, or simply bandit camps which can be cleared and looted for different goods. I've probably missed on other forms of content that I don't remember or haven't even explored. However, this is a good sign that the game will never leave you bored or puzzled on what to do next. As established until now, the game was a huge commercial and critical success.
Money.
Everyone at CDPR were probably already celebrating. However, they had a lot more under the sleeve. To be exact, 2 DLCs, which, if you ask me, were 2 whole new games just because of their expansion value in terms of content and gameplay. Just 5 months after the base game's release, in October 13, 2015, Hearts of Stone was out for everyone. Obviously, I played it right after finishing the main campaign, and I have to say, I did not expect that amount of content. The premise of the story is intriguing, while being hidden in the mystery, and the characters are so fascinating and full of charisma, for better or worse. The villain here is way better than the Wild Hunt, and in a way this means that I hated the hell out of him in every aspect. The Man of Glass is this gene entity which portrays itself as a man, the most disgusting, manipulative, narcissistic of men out there. Even his face looks like bad news, and his voice sounds like a punching bag.
I promise he'll not die.
The thing is, you don't relate to him because you can't. His motivations are simply not human, by not being one. He's essentially a bored god who likes to play with human lives using verbal games, and he does that through manipulation of their insecurities and their deepest desires. The different storylines are really interesting, with a fresh new tone in relation to the main campaign. It really had its own identity and weight. One of the best bits is by far the wedding mission, which is quite something to say the least. It has drama, hilarity, and quite a few interesting character moments. But in my opinion, the main storyline is what makes this expansion memorable. This guy started out as a mysterious figure. Then he becomes an immortal manipulator who uses Geralt only to become one of the most sympathetic characters I've ever encountered in the mainstream media. When you unravel his backstory, you will understand what I'm talking about. And by the way, that thing happens in a certain mission where the visual presentation is fucking masterful. I mean, look at this shit, come on guys, this is pure cinema. It felt like living inside a bloody painting the entire time. I don't know a better way to put it, honestly. Even the opening of this DLC, it's crazy. I mean, this was one of the best monster encounters I faced in the entire game. And the landing was so damn good. You're living inside the nightmare that Olgierd had been living for so long because of his mind games. When Geralt finally gets rid of him and releases Olgierd from the curse, you can breathe alongside them on top of that mountain as a free man. Maybe it drags a bit in a few spots here and there. However, it remains a solid expansion to an already great campaign. Now, let's move on to the last big piece of the puzzle. In May 31st of 2016, the second and the last DLC of The Witcher 3 got released.
Wolves asleep amidst the trees.
The community was already in mad hype right after seeing the first trailer for the damn thing. People still go back to them to this day. I mean, the comment section speaks for itself. If you ask me, it's kind of wholesome to see a community come together to lift something up. rather than, well, tearing it down. Now, before I start rambling in detail, I'm just gonna state right here that Blood and Wine is the best that this game has to offer in all aspects. Of course, I can't speak for everybody, but to me, it was and still is my favorite part of The Witcher 3. And of course, I'm gonna try my best to explain you why. To start things off, Toussaint. Man, the devs weren't lying when they marketed this place as a fairy tale. I felt like Pinocchio cantering through Tuscany the entire playthrough, and that art style, it's like a happiness filter for your eyes. It has this saturated and colorful photography, which also reflects the fact that these territories are untouched by the horrors of war. The best way to understand what I'm talking about is to put Velen and Toussaint side by side. I don't think I need to add anything else here. The open world is as vibrant as usual. The architecture is yet again amazing, full of life and detail. And I'm not just referring to the exteriors. Like all the buildings in the other maps, the devs have paid as much attention to the interiors, if not more. The lighting is so magical at times that it made me want to rewatch the Shrek movies. The amount of content is even more prominent in the first DLC. It's actually astonishing how they managed to design a whole new map with so much content attached to it. If we talk about monster types, lore and gameplay mechanics, it expands in all of them and more. The main attraction are obviously the vampires. The way they're used in terms of story and gameplay is really good in my opinion, especially the story, which honestly is my favorite out of all three. Geralt is called upon by Anna Henrietta, the Duchess of Toussaint, who has a contract for him stating that he has to track down the cause of multiple murders in Beauclair and, well, handle it.
What the hell do you want me to do? Huh?
I want you to handle it.
He agrees, of course, and gets escorted in the castle of Beauclair, which is also one of the main attractions of this map. Not that it takes away any of the beauty and charm of the surrounding landscapes. Eventually, after some investigation, you find the culprit, but it's not as black and white as it might seem. In fact, the story plays a lot with characters in terms of nuances, and that's what makes Blood and Wine so fascinating. Alright, I won't get into any more details just because I wouldn't do it justice. Just know that this expansion has a really good plot and plot. Alongside vampire-type monsters, the bestiary expands even more with centipedes and carnivore flowers, which are quite refreshing in terms of visuals, but also in terms of gameplay, I would say, because you'll have to adapt your playstyle according to their movement patterns. The characters are all great. I didn't seem to dislike any of them this time around, and not to mention there are certain dramatic moments that made their damn impression on me. Especially the climax. I mean, it felt apocalyptic, not just in the way it was presented visually, but also through fantastic dialogues and some really tough choices you had to make in crucial moments. The gameplay is expanded with some new mechanics which add even more layers to your playstyle. The mutation upgrade system is the main one, which allows you to evolve your signs even further, making them a powerhouse. I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be, so I'm going to wrap this up here. I mean, the game is so massive anyway that no amount of words will ever be enough to describe it. And at the end of the day, the point of this video isn't to describe you every single thing. The point is to give you the most exhaustive answer. Is this game worth playing in 2024? Absolutely yes. Man, go play the fuck out of it. I don't care if it's 2024 or 2074. This game will always be worth playing, just because it's a timeless experience in my opinion. And if you want the most out of it, try and play it as thoroughly as possible. Read, explore and absorb as much as you can from this universe. You won't regretted. CDPR not only designed and developed one of the best RPGs in history, but also one of the best games in general. And sure, it has some problems in the main campaign and in some technical aspects. However, nothing so big that will ruin your experience, and me personally, I absolutely enjoyed my time with it, and we're talking about 190 hours of playthrough here. The Witcher 3 seemed like the natural ending for the franchise. However, CDPR couldn't possibly stop there after the kind of success they had, so they of course are working on the 4th chapter, which we don't know any official details about, other than the fact it is being developed with Unreal Engine 5. And from what I've seen regarding that piece of software, while considering what they were able to achieve almost 10 years ago with Witcher 3, I can only imagine what we're about to see. Man, that's a lot of shit to fit in a single video, so if you made it to the end, I really appreciate you guys, and I hope you did like what you saw. If you did, please drop me a like, feel free to comment your thoughts, share the video, and if you have some room for another channel, please consider subscribing, because more in-depth video game reviews just like this one are on the way.